Welcome back to Critic Proof. I'm your host, Alyssa Rosenberg, the critic at thinkprogress.org, and soon to be a culture writer with the opinions section of the Washington Post. So forgive me that announcement. I will let you guys know where to find me as soon as I know where I'm going to be able to be found. And I'm here today with one of my dear friends and favorite people to talk about all things culture with, Slate's TV critic, Willa Paskin. Hi, Willa.
Hi, Alyssa.
Thank you for joining me. I wanted to start out by talking about everyone's current bananas obsession, which is HBO's True Detective. And I wanted to talk specifically about an issue that you wrote about this week, that Emily Nussbaum at The New Yorker wrote about this week, and that I sort of chimed in on after the two of you, which is how the show handles women. And True Detective is a show that's told sort of very tightly from within the perspectives of two men, neither of whom have particularly healthy relationships with women. And I think Emily, and to a lesser extent I, have felt frustrated by this aspect of the show. And you wrote a lengthy and I think really interesting argument that that is sort of the point. So I was wondering if you could take us through that a little bit, because it's been an interesting debate, and seeing the vehemence with which some people have responded to the idea that a show that's about men might have better female characters has been, I think, interesting, if not particularly surprising to me.
Yeah, so I think one place to start with the True Detective thing is that, there are a lot of shows that are about serial killers and murderers and involve female corpses. We've seen a lot of those shows. I mean, you could turn on TV at any moment and
Yes.
find one. So, and I think that there's like a tactile difference to the way that True Detective has approached that from the very, very beginning. The first scene of that show, they come on upon a body that has been, sort of a female body that's naked, has these antlers on it, has been displayed. But compared even already to other shows with that sort of like the money shot, it was already much more tastefully done, which is a weird thing to say because it's a very horrifying image. But it already, I thought, was restrained versus even what's happening on CSI or something like that.
Sure, and it didn't take all the opportunities that it could have on cable to show, her whole body nude. I mean, we don't see her breasts, we don't see, her pubic area.
Absolutely. Right. It was very. I mean, it's like I had a conversation with someone who doesn't watch a ton of that kind of TV, and she was horrified by that opening shot. Like she didn't want to keep going, but as someone who watches a lot, I thought, oh, this is, I think, intentionally, they're showing it to us, but it's pulled back. Additionally, and, Nick Pizzolatto, the writer, I always mix these things up, those Italian vowels up, has talked about how he's not particularly interested in doing a serial killer show, for example. It's about this character piece. And I think that as the show has progressed, despite, before we get into the specifics about the female characters that we've seen, it's been not nearly as gruesome as it could be. And,
it's not
and
sort of gleeful.
That have been the most. It's not what?
It's not sort of gleeful. I mean, if if Rust is talking about the killer setting up sort of a paraphilic love map, all of us those of us who watch a lot of TV end up sort of engaging in that sort of paraphilia by proxy a lot of the time.
Yes. And I think, the scene where we saw the most bodies is when Rust is going through all those photographs. And it's supposed to be really as horrifying for us as it clearly is for him.
Yeah.
So I think that's like sort of the background. And the other thing is, this is not to bring girls into it so quickly, but I think one of the things about Girls and initially, when it first started to air and the racism complaints and sort of issues about how it dealt with race. To me, the very specific thing about Girls and Race was that it felt oblivious to race, which is to say it had clearly thought very much about the other isms, about class, about sexism, about, it was aware of them and ready to take on, the haters and the critics, or no matter what. Like it was well thought out. And it was about the issue of race that it was almost like caught flat-footed. Like it seemed just like they hadn't thought about it.
I think, though,
just maybe telling in one way or another.
But I think, so again, not to get completely derailed, and I will connect the two shows, but part of what's interesting to me about the narrative about Girls that's emerged is that race wasn't part of the show in the beginning. And that's not really true to the text of the show. You have, Hannah's encounter with the homeless man in the first episode who, sort of accosts her. She's walking down the street. And then you have this scene with Jessa and the nannies, which is meant to be this sort of explication of Jessa's unbelievable sort of privilege and cluelessness and kind of white girl do-gooderism. But it was really undermined by the fact that all the nannies themselves were these sort of very broad caricatures. And so,
right.
I think it's fair to girls to say that the show had thought about race to a certain extent, but executed that element of the show, much more poorly than any other of the isms that it's thought about, and has really continued to have problems with that.
We could have this fight about girls,
sure,
like everybody else in the world, for much longer. But I guess what I just meant with the comparison,
sure,
was just to say, my feeling about True Detective and Women was that it didn't have that feeling of obliviousness. Whatever, however poorly it's used its female characters and developed them, certainly compared to the two protagonists, it didn't feel to me like it had not thought about them. And this is sort of the argument that I made, which is that
sure,
this show is about what happens to women when nobody is paying attention. It's about all this violence and horror that's been perpetrated on women that literally is like unremarked upon, hidden, covered up. And there have been all these sort of clues that while that is reflective entirely of like the social world that our two heroes are in, and, reflects basically how they kind of see women, that the creators, while I think totally can come in for some criticism for going a little too far and sharing some of that sort of closeted worldview or, blinkered worldview about women, that they have at various moments also sort of indicated that they don't feel exactly the way that their heroes feel and are cognizant of just how, women are kept on the outs intentionally and traumatically and badly for everyone in this world.
Sure. I think in a weird way, I agree with everything you're saying about sort of women's bodies and the treatment of violence against women. It seems to me that Nick Pizzolatto and Cary Fukunaga have given more thought to dead women than to living ones. And I don't know if you think that's fair. The bodies of dead women are treated with respect. They clearly have sort of interests and stories. Like, they are people. But the writing for the living women is pretty thin a lot of the time. And it seems to me, given sort of how specific, every word out of Rust Cohle's mouth is, maybe that flatness with the women is intentional, but I don't think it serves the show as well as it might. Anne Helen Peterson, who I think we both enjoy reading, said yesterday that, depiction isn't necessarily an endorsement, but it's also not necessarily effective critique either. And I think that if the show was going to play a little bit more with some of the archetypes that it's clearly engaged with, like the wife of the difficult man, the mistress of the difficult man, the convenient for the plot stripper, there needs to be some more specificity there.
I think the thing that's interesting, I don't necessarily disagree, but I think that there have been, with a lot of these characters, have been given lines that very specifically are sort of winking at the audience about the sort of higher intelligence, that I've actually found some of them to be like pretty squarely on the nose, but I think are intentionally sort of trying to address that problem. There's this scene with the prostitute where she says, what holy bullshit from you to Marty, and like, what women have been screwing all the time for no money. What is it that, as soon as there's, money in it, you just realize you don't own it. Which was, I actually thought that scene was extremely, like, that dialogue was really exact. It was very like, this is the theme, underline,
Sure.
But I did think that it was there on purpose, as similarly with some of the stuff that Audrey has said to her father. I think similarly is clearly them trying to think about it, thinking about the living women. I also think that, Maggie last week really did have a story, and I think that a lot of, what was interesting to me that it's a little bit hard to articulate is, like, I was also impressed with the way that she clearly doesn't want to be part of this narrative, if that makes any sense. Like, she wants out of this story, personally, because she's not as crazy and caught up as these men, and that's sort of willful on her part. So there's this way that not only are they ignoring women, and not only are women being ignored, and not only are women being killed, but all of these women are see these dudes and this universe, and they are opting out. You know, they don't want to be part of it, for all the obvious reasons. I do think also that, you know, not next week, so in 2 weeks, the finale will be really telling, because it's just, what is this? If this ends up being a murder cult, or, you know, a murderer, or that's a sex trafficking ring, or it's really explicitly about even more these things about what's happening to women, I think then it's hard, whether or not you think it was executed well, I think it's hard not to think that this was very deeply something they've been thinking about.
Sure. I guess it's interesting to me the extent to which sort of my critical feelings about True Detective are really hinging on the finale. And you and I have both seen a week ahead. So, you know, we have some sense of plot and tone and, you know, where everyone's going to end up. But at the same time, you know, I feel like either, you know, it's going to be Cthulhu on the Bayou, it's going to be this sort of revelatory turn to horror, which we've seen some of tonally in the last couple of episodes, or it's going to be a rape cult, or Marty's daughters are going to be involved in some way.
I mean, or all of the above,
yes.
To be honest. Like, I don't think that any of those things excludes any of the other, really.
Yeah, I mostly just, you know, I mostly just want Audrey to, like, conjure up Cthulhu and, you know, everything will go to hell. That would make me very happy. But it really strikes me that the show, you know, and I think the show's been uneven week to week, which, you know, will get a lot of people very upset at me, but it's really hinging on the ending. And, you know, that can be exciting. You know, O. Henry has pulled off a whole career's worth of stories that way. But, you know, it strikes me that, you know, the show is going to be sort of more than the sum of its parts. Or it's going to be a lot less than the sum of its parts, one way or the other.
You know, I think the ending is going to matter. But I think it's really a great and good show, and I think just that, like, week to week, my enjoyment of it has been such that it's not that finales don't change how I think about the thing as a whole, but I think it's a really good TV show, and I also think, you know, I think that it's in the text, this stuff about women, and that's sort of why we're talking about it, but sure. I also think not every show sort of has to be everything to everybody, and
sure.
And there's this thing, which is just that, like, you know, so there's a couple shows that, before True Detective even started, I would have predicted that I would have hated it, because it's about a set of things that I basically hate in TV shows, which is, like, machismo, murder, death, all these themes that are so exhausted. There's, like, every show that's been about those things recently, I've, you know, wanted to shut my eyes and run away.
Yeah.
And I like, you know, like something like Ray Donovan, to The Following, to Hannibal, which I think people really like much more than I do.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things is that there's a kind of crappy show that I really like, you know, like there's a sort of soap opera with a love story that I'll put up with all sorts of badness, because that's fun for me. That's the kind of thing that I
think that's how we both feel about Nashville. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Nashville's a great example. And, you know, this is obviously like a little gendered, and I don't want to cast huge stereotypes, although I think there's some truth there, which is that, you know, we all have our shows that we just kind of like, even if they're junky. And I think that there's some sort of shows that appeal to dudes in the way that Nashville might appeal to me, which is like a show like Ray Donovan, or a show that's sort of about like macho men, you know, protecting and screwing women while it seems kind of, you know, that seems kind of serious, but it's actually kind of garbagey. And I don't want to take that show too seriously and overpraise it. I don't want to, like, say it's really good, because I don't think it is. But I also don't want to denigrate anyone's pleasure in that particular set of cliches, because we all have our cliches that we enjoy, you know?
Sure. You know, and I wouldn't say that I don't think True Detective is fun. I mean, I think the acting in it is really crackerjack. In a way, I mean, maybe this will sound strange, but as the tendency towards short seasons and sort of mini-series has gotten more pronounced, I've actually found some shows to sort of cut down below what I think would be interesting, and I really wish True Detective had 10 episodes. Because I think that, you know, a lot of people have said in response to, I mean, me and Emily, who have suggested the female characters could be stronger, that, like, there's only so much time, and I think the show could just breathe a little bit, you know? It's it's an intensely plot-driven show that doesn't
Although the last week's episode, you know, was sort of felt like filler, even though it was very focused on their relationship. It's like, I agree that I think they could use 2 more. Especially going into 8, I don't kind of understand how they're going to wrap everything up so quickly. Yeah. But
this is why it has to be Cthulhu. Like, everything just has to get wiped out. And that's,
you know. I see. The thing is, like, I think the thing that's going to happen is going to be more frustrating than that, which is that they're going to fail. You know? Like, I think they're going to fail in some really profound way, if not many. Because that's sort of what the show is about and has been about. You know, I don't think it gets to end simply.
Well, and it's also about what the Carcosa and the King in Yellow mythology is about. I mean, in the Ambrose Bierce short story, An Inhabitant of Carcosa, you know, the main character wakes up disconcerted, doesn't know where he is, and tries to get home and ultimately discovers that he's at his own gravesite, actually. And so he can never get home again. He can sort of never get answers. You know, in James Blish's, you know, short story about people reading the Robert Chambers book, The King in Yellow, you know, people try and fail to finish this play. And so these themes of sort of failure and futility and never getting to the answer are just baked into the mythology that the show's chosen to engage with. And so, yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you on that score. I just think something crazy would be fun.
It would be fun, but there's no, you know, the thing is, for as much as, like, we watching have all kind of gotten into the stuff, there's no mystical element of the show at all. You know, not one. So I don't, obviously these people believe in this stuff, some people on the show, but I don't think there's any indication that the show itself does, you know?
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, I think part of what I'm getting at is that I have enjoyed True Detective, but I think I would have more fun with it if it was steering a little harder into the crazy.
Totally. I mean, it could do that. I think, yeah. I actually, you know, what's funny is in Emily's review, it just reminded me also that so much of, like, criticism and how we react to things is just, like, it's like, someone said this, and when I was in journalism school, it was a quote that got said a lot, but it was like, you know, criticism is like explaining the why of your like, which is just, do you like it or do you not like it? And then you sort of have to think it through. And so I think Emily clearly had this very strong reaction that this show is totally messing up his relationship. Like, the show is totally pretentious, firstly, and it's the way it treats women is totally superficial. And I felt just not that way. Like, you know, I think Rust's speeches have gotten sort of more cloudy as he's kind of gotten older.
And fuzzier.
But those first ones really were pretentious, of course, but I felt smart. I really think he seems smart. I think the writing is smart. And that's a taste thing, you know?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, True Detective for me has also been a show that, to a certain extent, has gotten to the gap between critics and viewers, and in a way that I'm sensitive to. And, you know, we started out this conversation by talking about all of the other shows about serial killers and manly men. And if you watch one of those shows, or if you watch none of those shows, I think you're less likely to experience burnout on them, or, you know, to come across something like True Detective and feel like it's really new. And I think being a critic, you know, I'm coming up on 3 years of doing this professionally, you know, my pleasure centers at this point are more oriented towards being surprised or things I haven't seen before. And I think I sometimes award too many points for novelty. But it's, you know, I think being a critic wires your brain a little bit differently in a way that's inevitable.
Totally. I mean, I feel at this point really so overexposed to certain violent tropes in TV that I can't even see that the shows clearly. Like, there's this show called Red Road that's starting on Sundance on Thursday, and then this show called Those Who Kill that stars Chloe Sevigny. And I think that if I hadn't had my fill so extensively, I probably would have watched both of those shows really differently than I did. But I just can't, you know, like, dreary shows about dead people. It has to be really new. It has to be just much better for me to have any patience for it.
That's interesting. I think I like The Red Road more than most people did, in part because I think Jason Momoa is really fantastic, and, like, seeing someone use
him... Oh, really? I thought he spent the whole thing, literally in the first scene, like, he did 100 takes that were just, like, him smirking. Like, he can't do anything but, like, look menacing and smirk at the same time. I was like, you should only pay Khal Drogo. I thought he was really bad.
I mean, I happen to like the guy. I think he has
very foxy, though.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of charisma, and, like, that, you know, The Red Road is based on this federally unrecognized tribe of Native Americans called the Ramapo, who live in New York and New Jersey, and set in Jersey. And some of I don't know, I enjoyed it. But I think for me, like, I think Jason Momoa is underused, and so I just enjoy seeing him on my screen for reasons both, professional and aesthetic, and I had more fun with it than most people did. Martin Henderson's a total bore, though. I mean, the fact that you have to have, like, a white guy whose girlfriend Jason Momoa slept with in high school is, like, that's super dull.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it was one of those shows where there was not one iota of humor in the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Just bleakness after bleakness after bleakness.
Yeah, and I have been super burned out. Like, one of the reasons that I like The Americans, which comes back Wednesday night so much, is that it's really not afraid to be silly. Like,
right. It has a lot of built-in ridiculous costumes that are part of its, like, setup,
Yeah, and there's a sequence in this season where Martha, the FBI employee who's, like, secretly fake married to Clark, who is actually Philip, who is actually a KGB spy, like, basically pulls a Liz Lemon and gets drunk and, like, spends too much time on her phone. And it's a really funny sequence that they just kind of stuck in the show, and they probably could have used to, like, more propulsive plot ends, but it was really entertaining.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel about that show, like, that show is so fun that it doesn't have to be nearly as smart as it is. And it is that smart.
Yes.
And it's so great. You just are like, this is really entertaining. It's like this love story. There's all this action happening. It has this, like, it's set in this awesome time. It's spy stuff. Like, everything is sort of just so delicious and delectable. And then it's totally really, really thoughtful and smart about everything that it sort of addresses. It's like, it just feels like a real treat, and not in just like not in a hollow way. Just really, like, what more could you ask for?
And that's a show that's really interesting to me, because I think we're in this sort of second generation of, like, kind of macho, loner, artistic visionary male showrunners. You've got Pizzolatto on True Detective, you have Beau Willimon on House of Cards, and the guys who run The Americans, Joel Fields and Joe Weisberg, are, like, two self-effacing, like, super friendly guys who are just interested in a lot of this stuff. I was on set last week and ended up talking to them about, like, how much they loved, like, Leo Buscaglia, the Love Dr. Love from the 1980s. Yeah. And, like, that's just, like, it's so sort of self-effacing and, like, not cool that it makes me find them and their show cooler.
Yeah. I think that I feel like I don't know how much these people's personalities, I hope that they don't matter that much. I know they matter to their show. I hope it doesn't matter to their show in totally A to B directions,
Sure. No, I mean, I think it's just going to be very interesting to me, both to see what happens at the end of True Detective and what happens in the next season. I mean, Pizzolatto starts out as a short story writer, and so I'm just curious,
I mean, also, there's no reason to think, I think True Detective's format is really interesting because there's really no reason to think next season's going to be any good, just because,
McConaughey and Harrelson are so good,
Right. It just writing a show all by yourself is really hard. There's a reason other people don't do it. Rust in particular is, I think, a lot of the reason that people are really attracted to the show. It's really hard to make a character like that every time out.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a lot of reasons that it might not be as awesome, and it'll just feel like second best.
Yeah. No, I mean, we'll have to see. I think it's going to be really interesting. It's getting bananas ratings. I mean, I think it's, nudging up there with Game of Thrones when all the viewing data.
HBO probably wishes this season were longer, honestly. It would only keep getting bigger.
Yeah, no, and I think it'll be really interesting to see them make that transition. And, honestly, it would be super great to see them do a story with two women,
or at least one, which I think he's suggested that that's definitely possible. I think on Twitter he sort of said something to that effect.
Yeah, so we'll have to keep our fingers crossed and see what happens. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of this is just going to be seeing what happens. While I have you here, I was hoping we could switch tacks and talk about the Academy Awards this upcoming weekend. I know you hate American Hustle, but is there anything that you are affirmatively...
I actually don't hate American Hustle. You know, we write these polemics. I
Sure.
think American Hustle is overrated, and I enjoyed it, but I don't think it's like a great movie. But yeah, I've seen almost all of them. I haven't seen Nebraska or Philomena, but I've seen the other
Yeah.
Best Picture ones.
Well, let's talk about American Hustle for a minute, because that is a movie to me that doesn't hold together at all. Like, it seems to me there are several potentially very good movies in it, but it's just like it's a lot of stuff thrown at the wall.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of very, very fun elements that kind of
Yeah.
don't necessarily amount to much, which doesn't mean that it's not fun to sit through in a movie theater, because it is.
Yeah.
It's just
Although
afterwards
it
when you
is
think about it.
long. It's like, it feels
Yeah.
long.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, Matt Solar Seitz said a couple of months ago that he thought the movie, it was becoming sort of the least controversial of the Best Picture nominees, and so it would win. Which I think strikes me as kind of true. I don't know if that's your sense, but I feel like both The Wolf of Wall Street and 12 Years a Slave.
Right. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street was never really a front runner. It's like kind of between Gravity and American Hustle and 12 Years a Slave.
Sure.
Is my sense of the landscape of the race. But you know, it is just so, there's something that's so funny and strange to me about the Academy Awards and the way that they start to mirror real politics in this one particular way, which is that, you know, when we're voting in primaries, there becomes like all of this sort of group think about who is electable in the general election that is always seems like a little sort of self-fulfilling, because it's like, if we all voted who we wanted to vote for, why wouldn't this person possibly win in a general election? Or they would have a lot more support, you know?
Yeah.
But at least there's some like logic there, which is like, listen, if it's the leftiest person, then the general election will happen and they won't be moderate enough or whatever. But something kind of similar almost seems to happen in the Academy Awards, which like people are like, oh, that one's not even really in contention, so we're only going to deal with the serious ones. When it's like, there's no, just vote your heart. It's the Academy Awards, you know? So it's like this sort of groupthink that coalesces about stuff that I always find a little puzzling. Like, why are there, I mean, sometimes there's front runners because something's really good, but sometimes there's just front runners because everyone's like, that's what's gonna win.
But I think at the same time, you know, we don't necessarily have input on what gets nominated, and the Academy is a very analyzable voting body, right? I mean, it's not sort of polled the same way that the American electorate is, but it's something like 95% white, it's old, it's mostly liberal, and so you can, I mean, I think it is possible to form some opinions about what that particularly sort of sorted body of people is going to like.
I mean, yes and no, because it's also like that particular body of people also has this, clearly has, there's just like a lot of competing things they might appeal to them. You know, they have a real sense of themselves as being important. So
and they have a puckish side too, you know.
Right. So it's just like, you know, you can make the case for a lot of why 12 Years a Slave would win by thinking about what that group of people might like, and also why Gravity would win, you know, and I'm not, and I mean, obviously, I think, you know, I think also that, I think Mark Harris said this, which is that you can really see trends in sort of what gets nominated over time, but you can't really see trends in winners. And I thought that was totally right on, you know, which is that all the time there's flukes and bad choices in winners. And then you see groups of things, and that's like sort of much more telling about the year in movies than whoever happens to actually come away with the award. Yeah.
I have to say, and like, I really don't care about who wins award shows most of the time. I find, you know, predicting it is not that interesting to me. I am going to be really upset if 12 Years a Slave goes home empty-handed in some way. And I don't really think it will. But what I found very frustrating about the conversation about that movie is that, like, it's become just an issue movie. And, you know, you can feel however you want about Steve McQueen. Like, people and people's feelings about Steve McQueen do vary. But I thought that was a movie that was just so artistically gorgeous, and it is so well acted top to bottom. I mean, it's really kind of remarkable that, you know, I think Sarah Paulson's conversation in that movie has gotten very little attention, despite the fact that it is unbelievably good and scary and upsetting and sort of rich and revealing about gender and sex and class. I mean, I think that movie is really deeply cast, with the exception of the, like, insane and horrible Brad Pitt cameo.
Yeah. I think that I agree with everything you just said about it, but I do think it is an issue movie.
Sure.
That is actually what it is, and it is explicitly an issue movie, and No one who made it doesn't think that it's an issue movie. They think it's also a piece of art that's extremely well done. But it is about that.
I guess what I find frustrating is I think that when something is an issue movie, there's a tendency to assume that that's
Isn't what?
That when something is an issue movie, that it's sort of put in a separate category, and so its artistic elements and its acting tend to be treated as if they're less important facts about the movie, which I find really frustrating.
But of course, obviously, being an issue movie often with the Academy, helps enormously. I mean, this is like Kate Winslet joke in Extras about the Holocaust. It's just like play someone in the Holocaust, you win an Oscar. So I think also to think that the conversations about these movies haven't all been simplified.
Sure,
they have been. So. I think I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that people have been sort of dismissive of 12 Years a Slave as an issue movie. It's not like the fact that they haven't mentioned it doesn't mean they're not like other things doesn't mean it's not.
I just think the conversations. I just think the conversations have gravitated to its issue-ness, its level of brutality, and it just makes me a little sad. I mean, it also, look, it just frustrates me that Fruitvale Station, which I thought was. Mm-hmm. Really one of the better movies of the year, just isn't up in any of these categories, and it's not nearly as visually striking, but that is.
But this is why the Oscars are silly, because it's obviously, and I think also the thing about 12 Years a Slave that's very clear is people are going to be talking about it for a very, very long time, and a ton of these issues and the details that aren't the issues stuff is going to get discussed. This is a movie that's going to be not just taught in high school, where it might stay on that sort of that level, but watched and thought about for a really long time by a lot of people, as I think is Fruitvale Station. So it's not like
I know. I just
the Oscars, in the Oscars, this is what I said when I was writing about American Hustle, which is so funny and true about the Academy Awards is like. We all know they're dumb, but it's so hard not to
care.
Right. They have meaning even though we know how limited they are, So
yeah.
And it's really impossible not to read into them even though we know that sometimes there's no there.
No, and as someone who cares a lot about issue movies, it would be nice to see an issue movie that also deserves to be there on the artistic merits win. I hate seeing bad issue movies win, which is why, the sort of perpetual kicked dog of Crash is so frustrating, right? Because that's
right. Or like Dallas Buyers Club, maybe.
Yeah. No, it's tricky. I want to talk to you about The Wolf of Wall Street, since this is a movie that
let's talk about The Wolf of Wall Street. I'm going to do a thing that they're going to be mad at, but I just have to silence my refrigerator, which is making a banging. But I'll be back in 1 second.
Absolutely. I can wait.
I'm now back. It has a rattle on it. Go ahead.
So how did you feel about Wolf of Wall Street? Because I saw it and then needed a month and a half to write about it because it was just really hard for me to organize my thoughts about it.
So I think I saw it after I had read, probably about a week after it opened, or maybe not, but I had seen a lot of things about it. And I actually really, really liked that movie, and I thought my reaction was definitely, so much. Your expectations going into a movie, I find, matter so, so much. If everyone tells you it's amazing, it's so much easier to think it's terrible because your expectations are too high and vice versa. And one of the things, it's been a while since I thought about it or saw it, but
sure.
I just felt like seeing that movie, it was impossible to believe that Martin Scorsese, who was such a schmo, that he would have loved that he didn't know those guys were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And then the movie clearly was so much more complicated and so much more wanting us to be uncomfortable with our sort of like of them than the simple read of it that's like it's a celebration of these schmucks. So I thought it was, it was funny. Like, I think I was sitting next to some people when some scene was happening, which I don't remember. And people in the theater were laughing, and he sort of leaned over to his girlfriend or his wife or whatever and said, like, it's not supposed to be, like, they shouldn't be laughing. It's not funny. And the thing is, it is funny. And I think the thing where you are implicated in laughing at this horrible thing is, like, the whole point of the whole movie, which is the whole point of all the things that have happened with Wall Street, right? Which is we are watching and kind of not doing anything that we should be doing, but having some sort of other kind of reaction instead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have been sort of frustrated by the critique of it that said that the movie should have shown Belfort's victims. Because I actually think the movie does something sort of powerful and more economically and aesthetically Puritan than a lot of other movies. If you watch Wall Street or Margin Call, I mean, Gordon Gekko is doing things that are illegal, but he has the great hair and the great suits and this sort of grand office and these big ideas about capitalism. And if he wasn't doing anything illegal, you might disagree with his ideas, but you'd still find him sort of an impressive person. Like, the boundary between Gordon Gekko being acceptable and not is sort of the legality of the insider trading, rather than him having poor taste or poor manners or socially unacceptable ideas. And in The Wolf of Wall Street, the movie so clearly just thinks these guys are incredibly tacky and tasteless. I mean, one of the things that I think is amazing about sort of Jordan's Long Island mansion is that there are never any pictures on the walls. There's no art. It's like he just...
It's like cribs.
Yeah, I mean, when you see that scene of his yacht, it's like, it's totally furnished by the company. When he talks about his suits, he never talks about what he likes about them. He just gives us brand names and dollar figures for what things cost. Like, he thinks that riding in a limo makes you classy. And I think the movie is really obviously disgusted with Jordan's consumptive habits, right? Like, the issue isn't so much that he's doing things that are illegal, although that's, of course, what brings him down, but that he's tacky. And I think that's a much more interesting thing for a movie about finance to say. If they were making it today, instead of them groping on airline stewardesses, it would be bottle girls at clubs or whatever, wherever finance dudes go to play these days. And I think, Scorsese is actually much more judgmental just of wealth in the movie than something like Wall Street or even Margin Call is. Margin Call is another movie where people have done sort of shady things, but, like, they're sophisticated, they're beautifully dressed. You can sort of see the appeal of those people, and it's just their actions that are bad. Whereas I think The Wolf of Wall Street just finds Jordan totally repulsive.
Although, I think, they are totally repulsive and not totally repulsive. They're fun to watch. And
yeah, well, and obviously part of the movie in the end is, like, there are a lot of people who want to be like this,
Yeah, and there are,
Yeah, no, I think that's entirely true. What did you think about sort of gender in the movie? Because this is where I got hung up. I got out of the movie and called my boyfriend and said, this movie made me feel grosser than I felt in a long time. And specifically the scene where Jordan is sort of talking about, like, the 3 classes of hookers. And what we see on the screen is, like, I told him, it was like, I think my naked body looks more like the hooker that Jordan thinks is disgusting than, like, the hookers he thinks are high class. The movie did make me feel really physically gross.
Yeah, I think it has some of the same issues, actually, that True Detective has, which is, like, what is the line between showing how gross these people are and just showing us actual how much are you participating in perpetrating all these horrible stereotypes and thoughts about women, and how much are you just sort of cataloging and chronicling it?
Yeah.
I think 100% that it had that's there to see, which is, like, there's all these, very naked, very beautiful women, and that's there to see. I don't, for some reason, this issue, I'm learning, it doesn't bother me quite as much as I think it does other people. Not because I don't think I'm paying attention to it or for any good reason, except that I sort of I just am not. I think, like, I don't know what I think. I have to think about it a little more about why I think it bothers me less. I sort of think it's like, I know that change has to start somewhere, but I am not sure that it's on these pieces of art to be held to these standards, that all this other junk that is so much more criminal in this regard is not. And that does affect us. Like, the idea that it's only the good stuff that really gets to us is so clearly not true, and we all are consuming so much volume of so much junk and crap that is so much worse that it's like,
I think the thing that was hard for me about it is that there are scenes where, like, what Jordan is doing to women, the movie has much more clear disgust for Jordan's behavior towards women in certain moments than others. Like the head shaving scene towards the beginning of the movie, which I think is amazing. I think that's one of the best scenes in movies of the last year. I think provides this really illustrates Jordan's unreliability as a narrator. And I think the scene where he is effectively raping his wife towards the end of the movie does the same thing. But because the movie flags when it doesn't agree with Jordan, to me it seems like it agrees with him more in the moments where it's not drawing that distinction. And that's where I sort of started to have some trouble. Go
ahead.
I remember watching the ad that he's cutting for like his consulting or public speaking business and thinking, this is a lot less pervy than this movie. Like, it's almost like Scorsese's imagination is more louche than Belfort's.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that I have to say that however I felt at Wolf of Wall Street, I did really, in this instance, feel like the people who had a different vibe on it were totally right. Like I didn't think they're wrong, that it sort of is so decadent and throwing the stuff in your face, and that you are supposed to sort of get a kick out of it. So, where is the moral locus of the movie? I did really feel like those were valid complaints. Although I do think except for the one that I think, Martin Scorsese is not a dummy. He knows that he's doing enough. There's no way that he's just like co-signing it. But I did, I feel like that stuff is there very, very profoundly in that film. It didn't sort of tarnish, I think, what it does well for me.
It's interesting. I feel like something that has come up, I think, in our casual conversations, and as well as, so both True Detective and this discussion, is that, preferences are preferences. And I think one thing I found in some readers' reactions to me is sort of a sense of anger that I'm trying to take something away from them when I disagree with them. And it's made my job less fun over the last year or so. I don't know if you've had any of that feeling, but I feel like that vibe is sort of on the rise.
Well, I think to be fair, I mean, I think I interact with like commenters and what people think about things a lot less than you do. I mean, I just don't. I think it seems really emotionally, you make yourself emotionally open to a lot of craziness. I mean, also to a lot of really good stuff too.
Sure.
So I think there's, good and bads about it. But yeah, I mean, I think, the thing about sort of talking about these works, some of which is art and some of which is not, this entertainment product that we all care about a lot. It's like we all, people have really strong feelings about what they like and what they don't like. And I think it is a little artificial to suggest that when we're making, when I'm making an argument about something, I'm making the argument. I really do, there's, it's like different strokes. People can like different things. And I say that all the time. But a part of me really is like, no, this one's good and that one's bad and this is stupid and that's not. And weirdly we are, even if we're being civil and polite and occasionally, right-thinking people can have different opinions about something. Or not even just occasionally, often, in the heat of the moment, really, you do, it is like a zero-sum game, and we are trying to take something away from them, or at least to make them think about it differently. So I don't think reacting with total anger is like the ideal reaction, or hostility is right, but I don't think that, it's like, I want to destabilize what someone who likes something I think is terrible thinks, I want them to have to think about that, and vice versa, and...
No, I think that's true.
If that makes them angry, then, like... That's not, I wish they wouldn't be angry because it's just a TV show. But, I understand that because sometimes it makes me crazy too. Sometimes you talk to someone who loves something and you're just like, especially if they can't explain it well, you feel like you just ran into a wall. But when they can explain it well, it doesn't always feel better to be undone by what they had to say.
Yeah, I guess what I would say, I feel like I am capable of enjoying stuff that I'm frustrated by. I mean, I've written some critiques of True Detective. I also went down a crazy rabbit hole of conspiracy theories about it. And like pretty much the instant my boyfriend and I got the DVDs for the most recent 3 episodes, we sat down and watched them all and then had nightmares and were really freaked out and couldn't stop talking about it. And I think, maybe this is something, I don't see any particular show or my sense that one show or the other, or one movie or the other is the best as, I guess neither my identity nor my pleasure is threatened by picking at something.
Totally. Exactly.
And
but other people's is. I mean, that's what's the one thing about True Detective that's very strange to me, and actually not just True Detective, but this sort of like, it's the greatest show of our time, like the great drama conversation, is that like once a show is in that echelon, we can't harp on the things that it does wrong. People seem really interested in sort of anointing these shows again and again, and then acting like there's nothing critical to say about it, which is clearly not true. And I mean, it's almost like they want you to have written in italics like a disclaimer at the beginning, being like, I really enjoy this show, by the way, you know, that as if like pointing out what's wrong really is meant to undermine anyone's pleasure instead of sort of expanding it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, one thing I always try to explain to people is that I don't go hard after trash. I mean, I'm not writing about mixology, which premieres tonight, and, you know, it's something that I could probably tee up on and, you know, hit it really hard, but that's not that interesting to me. The reason that I'm spending time on a show like True Detective is that I think there is a lot to enjoy there. There's a lot of really impressive craft, and so I want it to be awesome. You know, I want it to be great, and I don't do this to shows that I don't care about, or I don't have some sort of investment in, or that I don't respect. And I feel like that's become, in some circles, more difficult to communicate.
Yeah. I mean, I believe you. I think, like, also, people are nuts. You know, like, not to whatever, but they are. And, like, you can't engage, you know, what is it? Anna Holmes tweets, like, don't engage with the eggs. Like, which is, like, you know, anyone who has a Twitter avatar that's an egg. It's, like, you know, somebody you just have, there has to be, you don't have to be accountable to everybody.
No, obviously.
And anybody who's, you know, joy in True Detective can be so undermined by your pointing out some inconsistency in it. It's, like, it's just sort of silly. It's, like, why would they hold up anything? Like, nothing's really perfect.
Yeah, well, and it's, you know, yeah, there's nothing that's perfect, and art is created by humans.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what's good about them, and that's what stumbles about them sometimes. It's I don't know, it's just an interesting time. I'm not, you know, I feel like we're in a moment when there's just a lot of really fun content to talk about. I mean, you know, when Phil Lord and Chris Miller can drop the Lego Movie in, you know, late January, early February, and have it just be this, like, totally delightful thing. I mean, I think we're super lucky to have True Detective and The Americans airing at the same time. And yeah, it's a bounteous time in a lot of ways, and I feel lucky about that.
Oh, me too. This is why also I was so horrified to watch Red Road and Those Who Kill, because I've been spoiled, because for the last, like, 2 months things have mostly been great, and I forgot that you have to watch the bad stuff too, and it's
we're coming up on sort of March through August, that dread period in the TV schedule.
Yeah,
but you know,
something usually pops up. Yeah,
it's true. Yes. Well, I feel like our lives are so hard.
Yeah, let's totally end on that note. It's so hard to watch TV all day.
Yeah, I think we have to both retire to our fainting couches. Well, thank you for joining me. This was terrific, and we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you for having me.